The first time I met my first boss of the first real job I had, it was about 30 years ago on a hot, sweltering Texas night. And I was standing with my nose pressed against an olive drab green military wall locker with all of my bags in my right hand, exactly 6 inches off the ground, and he was yelling at the back of my head. His name was Sergeant Miguel Cacho, my drill instructor. I was Airman Basic Shawn Westfall, trainee United States Air Force. I joined the military about a year after I graduated high school. I'm not going to enumerate the things that I did in high school that qualified me absolutely for a military career. First, I was the editor of the literary magazine. Second, I was in musical theater, so I could quote you chapter and verse through Lerner and Loewe and Sondheim. And third, I was also in the madrigals. And so I would wear tights in front of the entire high school consortium. If that doesn't say together, defender of freedom, I really don't know what does. Another thing that sort of prompted me to join the military, I was getting in a little trouble in the small Midwestern hamlet that I lived in. Nothing felonious, more misdemeanor-ish, but let's just say that, well, one authority figure, let's call him a judge, said that I was on a path toward iniquity and I probably should do something about it, and perhaps the military was the right way to go. So I ended up joining the military, and that's where I met Sergeant Cacho. Sergeant Cacho was 5'5" tall and 5'5" wide, with an ounce of body fat on him. And he was a Mexican-American man and talked with a real heavy accent. It was difficult to discern exactly what Sergeant Cacho was saying. There was one word he was particularly fond of, and he said it a lot, fuck. He said fuck a lot. In fact, he worked in fuck the way Shakespeare worked in sonnets, like an artisan, a craftsman. And I heard a lot of fucks in my time from Sergeant Cacho. Going through basic military training is a lot like being tasked with cutting down a California redwood and being given a nail file to do it. It's a lot of really interesting jobs or tasks that seem insurmountable on the surface of it, but basically the military is just trying to test you to see what you know and how you can do it and things like that. For instance, folding your underwear in 9-inch squares. I have yet to see the value, and still don't, of folding my underwear in 9-inch squares, and certainly given the geopolitical things that were going on, did not understand the strategic value to vanquishing our enemies, which at the time were the Soviet Union, which, as we all know, were full of godless communists, which are the worst kind of communists. But Sergeant Cacho did, and in fact, folding your underwear in 9-inch squares basically made sure that freedom and democracy reigned on the face of the earth. And not 9.5, and not 9 3/4, and not pentagons or hexagons, 9-inch squares. And when I didn't do it, Sergeant Cacho let me know, Airman Westfall, these underwear is not folded in 9-inch squares. Do you know what 9 inches is? No, you don't know what 9 inches is. From here on out, the rest of the day, you report to me as Airman Dumbass. Sir, Airman Dumbass reports as ordered. Painting rocks white was another task that the military deemed important strategically. I don't know why. But that was one of the tasks that Sergeant Cacho told me to do. And not only was it important, but there was a technique, a specific technique for doing it, which I was not executing successfully. And when I didn't, Sergeant Cacho let me know. Airman Westfall, I have never seen rocks painted white so poorly. You couldn't paint a latrine brown with your own shit. From here on out, report to me as Airman Dumbass. Sir, Airman Dumbass reports as ordered. I continued to go through training, and surprisingly enough, I got a little better in some of these tasks. I'm not sure why or how, but it grew to the point that Sergeant Cacho saw fit to give me more responsibilities in the squadron. A couple weeks into training, he looked at the biggest guy in the squadron. He says, "Now, you're the squadron leader." And he looked at the second biggest guy, and he says, "You're the squadron assistant leader." Sergeant Cacho looked at me, and I don't know if he actually saw my military test scores, or if he did some research and found the poetry that I'd written for the literary magazine. But Sergeant Cacho made me the squadron education monitor. I was essentially the schoolmarm for the squadron. And my job was to excuse myself in chow lines as my comrades in arms were lining up 3 times a day, and quiz them, just pepper them with questions about military protocol, a chain of command, things like that. I would ask them, "Okay, so 2 silver bars on your shoulder, what does that mean?" Well, that would be a captain. Yes, that's right. 5 stripes, what would that be? That would be a tech sergeant. Yeah, that's right. The Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, Ronald Wilson Reagan. That's exactly right. And I was doing this one afternoon when a full bird colonel comes waltzing into the chow hall. And I actually didn't see him coming. And another thing you have to remember about this, and the military stresses this, you never ever salute an officer indoors. If you've ever seen movies where that happens, they're entirely incorrect. That's clear violation of protocol. And that had been drained or drilled into me by Sergeant Cacho, followed by Airman Dumbass, on countless occasions. But this full bird colonel comes waltzing in, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a senior officer in my short military career. The next step up is general, for those of you who don't know. And of course, what do? I'm sort of frozen in fear the way you would be when Jason comes at you with a machete in the Friday the 13th movies. And of course, I react. I pop a salute. And of course, the colonel reminds me, "Airman, you don't salute indoors." And everyone saw it happen. Everyone, my entire squadron, and Sergeant Cacho, who was on the other side of the room. All of a sudden, I hear his voice bellowing, "Airman Westfall, come over here right now!" So I skulk over to Sergeant Cacho, thinking that I've made a huge mistake. It's a mistake that might actually result in my being recycled, which means going back and repeating basic training all over again. 7 more weeks with Sergeant Cacho. So I skulk over to Sergeant Cacho. And of course, everyone can see us, including the colonel, but no one can hear us. And Sergeant Cacho says, "Nod your head." I said, "Sir?" He says, "Nod your head like I'm yelling at you." So I start nodding. He says, "Nod more vigorously." So I start nodding more vigorously. He said, "Airman Westfall, you're a smart guy. I think you're going to do okay in the United States Air Force, and I understand that you made a mistake. But we're going to give that colonel a show. We're going to make him believe that I'm really chewing your ass out. I'm going to start pointing at you to make sure that he understands that I'm chewing your ass out, even though I know that you made a mistake and that it probably won't happen again. Now when you walk back, look like I just chewed your ass out. Do you understand that, Airman Westfall?" "Sir, I do." As I walk back, I would have chewed through concrete for Sergeant Cacho and spit the concrete out on the other side smiling. I've never had a greater example of leadership in my entire life since. I've worked and still continue to work in corporate America, where leadership is bandied about as if it actually means something, or as if people actually know what it means. I know what it means, and that lesson came to me from a stout Mexican-American man from whom I can barely understand, who used to yell at me so close that his spit would lilt me occasion. I learned that lesson not to salute indoors. And I learned a much more important lesson about leadership that day. Ladies and gentlemen, Airman Westfall reports as ordered.